In this video, I'm going to look at the COUNTIFS, SUMIFS, and AVERAGEIFS. And like the other tools that we've been looking at in Appendix B, these functions are used to summarize data using different conditions or criteria. And so I just quickly want to look at the function syntax before we switch over to the actual worksheet. So in the COUNTIFS formula, it's just counting up the number of records that meet a certain set of criteria. And the thing that you need to remember about these is that all of the criteria have to be met in order for the record to be included in your answer. So you're just setting up several criteria ranges and criteria, and these functions can include up to 127 criteria. So here's an example here for this particular one. We're looking for employees whose job status is full-time, who are female, and who earn more than $50,000 a year. Let's look at the SUMIF. So SUMIFs include an extra argument. In the very beginning, you have to define the range that you want totaled or summed. If certain criteria are met, and again, it has to be all of the criteria or it doesn't get included in your answer. So in this formula, you see that we're adding up the annual salary field if the employee works in Austin, was hired on or after the 1st of January 2012, and whose job status is full-time. AVERAGEIFS work the same way. You have the average range and then your criteria. So here we have one where the annual salary is being averaged if the employee is male and has worked longer than 5 years. So let's switch over to the spreadsheet, and I'm going to do a COUNTIFS function here for number of employees who have worked 0 to 4 years and who do not work at home. So I'm going to use the Formula tab, and I'm going to go to More Functions, to Statistical, and choose the COUNTIFS. So my first criteria range is going to be the location that the employee works. Now, the location is a column heading in the employee table. So I'm going to start out by typing the name of my table, and then the field names are enclosed in brackets. And then my first criteria is that these people do not work at home, so I want it to be not equal to home. Now notice that as I advanced to criteria range 2, Excel placed quotes around my not equal to home criteria. And that's part of the syntax. The criteria are enclosed in quotes. So criteria range 2 will also come from the employee table, and this time I'm looking at years of service. So I'm going to type in years service for the field name, and I want people who have worked at least 0 years or more, because I want to capture those employees who oops, I'm putting that in backwards. those employees who have worked less than a year as well. And criteria range 3 will again be employee years service. And then I will press the tab key to get criteria 3 to show up. And this time I'm going to enter less than or equal to 4 because that's where I want the cutoff to be for this group of employees. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and there are the number of employees that meet those 3 criteria. So for total salary, I'm going to use the same criteria, but this time I'm going to use a SUMIFS function and I'm going to type it out. Now there are advantages to using the dialog box. The fact that it puts in the quotation marks and the commas and all of that stuff for you is kind of nice. You don't have to remember all the fussy little syntax things. But you also have to type out the names of the structured ranges, which brings into play a possibility of making mistakes. So the first argument I'm going to have here in my SUMIF is the sum range, which will be, I want it to add up the annual salary for the people who meet those criteria. So I'm going to start out by typing the name of my table, and you'll see that it becomes part of that list where you can find the function names. So I can just enter that, and then I type an open bracket which brings up the list of all the field names in that table, and then I can double click annual salary. I need to be sure to close the bracket and then type my comma because I want to do my first criteria, which is going to be employee location. And remember, we want that to be not equal to home because we don't want to include the employees that work at home in this particular function. And remember that you need to enclose it in the quotes. My second criteria range, just like the COUNTIFS function, will be the number of years the person has been employed. And I will use the same criteria, greater than or equal to 0. And then I'm going to use employee years service for the third criteria range, and the criteria, again, just like the COUNTIF function, will be less than or equal to 4. And I'm making sure to enclose this in quotes. So there's the total salary for the folks that meet those criteria. I'm going to go ahead then and copy this function to the average salary range, and rather than typing the function all over again, I'm just going to change the type of function by editing the formula so that the function type is an AVERAGEIFS. So there I have my 3 functions entered. I'm going to go ahead and use the fill handle to copy them down, and then I'm just going to edit them. So for this row, we're looking for employees who've worked between 5 and 9 years. So I'm just going to enter the criteria for the years of service on each one of these functions. Which is a lot faster than typing them out again. And since I know my first function worked, there's less margin for error. and therefore less frustration involved. So I've just about got my last function edited, and there you have the IFS functions. The thing that you need to remember about these, if you type them out, you need to be very, very careful about the required syntax. So the advantage then of using the dialog box is that it's going to put in the quotes and the commas for you, whereas if you type it you have to remember those yourself, but if you type it you can use the structured range names.